If you've ever played Planetside 2 for any amount of time, you've probably seen them running around the battlefield. The grey robots with no faction colours, no empire slogans, and no obvious allegiance. Those are NSO, often referred to as clankers. NSO, or Nanite Systems Operatives, are Planetside 2's fourth playable faction, and they were originally introduced to solve a very specific problem: population balance. Planetside has always struggled with uneven faction populations. One faction gets overpopped, wins more fights, and then more people join that faction. NSO was designed as a kind of freelance mercenary force, players who could be dynamically assigned to the underpopulated faction to help stabilize fights and help keep continents competitive. Instead of choosing TR, NC, or VS, NSO players fight for whoever needs them most. At least, that was the idea. Over time, NSO has evolved into something a bit different. It's no longer just a population balancing tool, it's become a completely unique way to experience Planetside 2, with its own weapons, vehicles, aircraft, aesthetics, and even a very different social experience. Playing NSO doesn't just change what gear you use, it changes how you play the game, how you approach squads, and how you experience the war as a whole. So in this video, I want to walk through what it's actually like to play NSO in 2026. We'll talk about guns, the vehicles and aircraft, the squad and platoon experience, the look and feel of the faction, and also some of the downsides, including paid alignment, and what that means for NSO's original purpose. By the end, you should have a clear idea of what NSO is, how it plays, and whether it's a faction that's actually worth your time. NSO weapons feel balanced and neutral. There's no obvious overpowered mechanic behind any of them. They don't fire as fast as TR weapons, they don't hit as hard as NC weapons, and they don't have the extremely low recoil you'd associate with Vanu weapons. Instead, the default weapons for each class are reliable all-rounders that, in the hands of a decent player, reward good positioning and timing with consistent kills. One of the first things that really stood out to me with NSO weapons was how well their visual aesthetic matches the NSO character model. The clean, industrial design fits the faction perfectly. On top of that, the sound design is completely unique, and it goes a long way in reinforcing NSO's identity. For some veterans, faction identity might not matter that much, but for a lot of players, having a strong visual and audio identity helps them become personally invested in their character, and NSO absolutely nails that. The default LMG, the XMG-100, is a personal favourite of mine. That said, one criticism I do have is that it loses a fair amount of accuracy to recoil and bloom, and it doesn't really hold up at long range in the same way that other LMGs do on other factions. The default carbine, the CB-100, has excellent hipfire accuracy, especially with a laser sight equipped, and like the default LMG, it really shines in a short to medium range. The default sniper rifle, the SR-100, it's semi-automatic and it has a very distinct visual and audio profile. It genuinely sounds like you're firing baseballs at the enemy. The default rocket launcher, the LAVAG, has a quick reload time and feels very rewarding to use. And the default sidearm, especially with a laser sight, is an absolute demon for quick hipfire headshots. One downside to NSO weapons is variety. There are only 3 unique weapons per weapon type, which is a lot less to choose from compared to the faction-specific arsenals of the 3 main empires. That said, NSO players can also use all of the standard Nanite Systems weapons, like the NS-15 LMG, the NS-11A and P assault rifles, and the NS-11C carbine. These are all weapons I've all-raxed on my NC character, and if I ever get bored of the NSO weapons, I know I can fall back on them and still perform really well. Overall, I wouldn't say any NSO weapons are overpowered in the way you might argue for something like the NC Gauss-Saw or the GD7F. Instead, NSO weapons are reasonably balanced, reliable all-rounders that reward good gameplay with consistent results. They might not feel mechanically flashy, but visually and audibly they stand out, and that unique feel goes a long way in defining the NSO experience. NSO offers 3 unique vehicles you won't find in any other faction: 2 ground vehicles and 1 aircraft, the Javelin, Chimera and Dervish. All emphasize experimentation, mobility and teamwork over raw power or survivability. The Javelin is a single pilot hovercycle with a rear rumble seat for a passenger. The pilot controls the weapon, while the passenger can use their own gear, making it versatile for medics, engineers or heavies. Its maglev technology and afterburner let it move incredibly fast and glide over the terrain. Though strafing is slow and it's very fragile, once mastered, it excels as a hit-and-run platform that rewards positioning and awareness. The Chimera is the NSO's main battle tank, featuring a driver-controlled cannon, a front gunner, and 4 exposed rumble seats for squad mates. Its independent front chassis and stable suspension make it highly maneuverable and resistant to flipping, letting coordinated teams adapt to tricky situations rather than overpower them. The Dervish is a 2-seat heavy fighter. The pilot handles light forward weapons, while the gunner operates a powerful turret for air and ground support. It's slower and less forgiving than solo fighters, but with teamwork it can dominate extended engagements. NSO's vehicles mirror the faction itself, not the safest or strongest, but flexible, experimental, and highly rewarding for players who prioritize teamwork and skillful maneuvering over brute force. One of the most interesting and sometimes frustrating parts of playing NSO is the squad and platoon experience. Unlike the main factions, when you play as NSO, you're not committing to a single empire. Each session, you can be placed into any of the 3 main factions depending on population balance. One night you might be fighting for the NC, the next for TR, and the next for VS. At first, this can feel really disorientating. You're constantly joining squads where you don't recognize the names, you don't know the outfit's culture, and you're not always familiar with how that faction tends to play. Some outfits are very aggressive, some are more defensive, and some platoons and outfits are incredibly organized, while others are less so. But over time, this actually becomes one of the biggest benefits of playing NSO. Playing across all 3 factions forces you to adapt. You start learning how different groups approach base captures, how different leaders call targets, and how priorities change depending on the faction and the situation. This is extremely helpful for developing your skills as a squad member and as a squad leader. For me personally, leading the Roy's outfit on NC, it's been very refreshing and sometimes surprising to see the high and low levels of organization on other factions and in other outfits. Turns out, the grass isn't always greener. NSO also encourages a more independent playstyle. You're less likely to have a tight-knit outfit behind you, so you learn to support fights where you're needed the most, pulling logistics, reinforcing weak points, or just filling gaps in a squad that's missing certain roles. And because you're constantly switching sides, you end up experiencing the war from every angle. You see the same bases attacked and defended by different factions. You learn the strengths and weaknesses of each empire, not just from fighting against them, but from fighting alongside them. In a weird way, playing NSO teaches you Planetside 2 as a whole, not just from the perspective of your favourite faction. NSO was originally designed to solve one main problem: population balance. You'd log in, get placed on the underpopped faction, and help stabilize fights across the continent. But with the introduction of paid alignment, everything changed. With paid alignment, players can permanently affiliate their NSO character with a single faction. Instead of being dynamically assigned where they're needed the most, they can always fight for the same faction, effectively removing themselves from the balancing system. It's easy to see why players choose this. Consistency matters. Familiar squads, familiar leaders, and a sense of faction identity are a big part of why people still play Planetside. But the downside is that it directly undermines the NSO faction's original purpose. When large numbers of NSO players are permanently aligned, the system becomes less effective at balancing faction populations during alerts. Underpopped factions don't get the same reinforcements as they used to do, and NSO shifts from being a balancing tool to just another faction-aligned playstyle. So is NSO still doing what it was designed to do? Partially. Unaligned NSO players still help balance fights, but overall, the NSO faction has transformed from a population balancing mechanic into what feels like just another infantry class locked behind a paywall. NSO isn't for everyone, and that's kind of the point. Players who tend to enjoy NSO the most are usually veterans who understand the game well and have already maxed out their primary faction character. If you want to see the other side to the war and you already know how fights develop, when to move, and when support is needed, NSO can feel incredibly rewarding. It also suits support-minded players. People who enjoy pulling logistics, reinforcing weak fights, or filling gaps in squads rather than chasing kills will get a lot out of the NSO experience. And finally, NSO really shines for adaptable, independent players. If you're comfortable jumping into unfamiliar squads, working with new leaders, and adjusting your playstyle on the fly, NSO plays to those strengths. On the other hand, NSO can be rough for brand new players. The weapons are less forgiving, as none of them are particularly OP. The squad experience is less consistent, and you don't always have the safety net of a familiar platoon or outfit. It's also probably not ideal for players who are deeply faction loyal or heavily invested in roleplay. NSO doesn't really offer that strong sense of faction identity, but for the right kind of player, NSO offers something completely unique, a way to experience Planetside from every angle, without being tied to a single faction. NSO isn't about fighting for a faction, it's about fighting for the war itself. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, I appreciate it, leave a like and comment, and I'll see you on Araxis.